Hello and welcome to this Beyond Blue webinar that's about what we call the Menopause Mind field. And really, it's about how we can look after our mental health in perimenopause and menopause. My name is Joanna Griggs. When I was first asked what I wanted my title to be for this webinar, I suggested Hot Sweaty Mess. But somewhat boringly, we went with Beyond Blue board member and personality instead. So sorry about that. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands which we're joining from. I'm currently in the Beyond Blue head office, which is on the lands of the Wurundjeri peoples, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and extend our respects to all elders and First Nations people across Australia. Beyond Blue also acknowledges those who are living with and managing mental health conditions such as anxiety and depression. We acknowledge their families, friends and supporters, and of course those affected by suicide. And a reminder, because we will be talking a lot about mental health today, please know that Beyond Blue support service is available 24/7 on 1300 22 4636 or online at beyondblue.org.au. I also wanted to note that the content today is informed by the lived experience relating to women with an experience of menopause. But we really want to acknowledge that gender diverse people who were assigned female at birth, AFABs, can also have experiences of menopause. So the information that we share may be helpful to anyone with an experience of menopause. So, as you would have noticed, menopause is a very hot topic right now, pun intended. I kind of wanted to say it was hairy to navigate, but I chose to behave instead. But let's face it, you can't scroll through social media or read the news without hearing about it. Awareness is rising, which for the most part is a great thing, but it can also bring confusion. So to help you, we brought together an amazing panel to help us navigate the minefield and separate fact from fiction. So let's say hello to them now. We have Miff Warhurst, who's a broadcaster, TV presenter, journalist, writer, and host of the ABC series The Truth About Menopause. G'day. We've got Professor Jayshree Kulkarni, who is a psychiatrist and women's health researcher and the director of the Her Centre Australia at Monash University. And we have Dr. Sarah White, who is the CEO of Jean Hales for Women's Health, which is Australia's national digital gateway for women's health information and education. A massive welcome to you all. Now, this is a very important conversation for Beyond Blue. While the physical symptoms of perimenopause and menopause are becoming more well known, there's less awareness about the impact that it can actually have on your mental health, and particularly for those with a pre-existing mental health condition. Now, we know that there are a lot of emotions and feelings out there, and that for many of you, it's having a huge impact on your day-to-day lives, both at work and at home. We're here to let you know that you don't have to navigate this minefield alone, and that there are lots of things that you can do to get the support that you need. Today, we invite you to pop your questions in the Q&A box as we go, because the second half of the webinar is dedicated to the panel answering your questions. We want to make sure that it's a safe space, so we've got Beyond Blue staff members who are moderating the chat to ensure that everyone feels supported. Now, there is an option to post anonymously, but if you do post anonymously, please note that we actually can't reply to you individually, so just keep that in mind. We will get to as many of your questions as we can, but I am just going to apologise in advance right now if we don't get to all of them. If you'd like to, you can also share your experiences, your symptoms and your frustrations, because we do know that a lot of us here are probably in the same boat, and it's always good to know that you're not alone. So please feel free to do so. So let's get started. Miff, I'm going to bring you in first. We know everyone's experience of the transition to menopause is different, but I'd really be interested to hear how it was for you. So if you feel comfortable, can you share your experience and how it impacted your mental health?
Absolutely, Jo, and thank you. I'm glad you brought in the expert first, which is me. No, I just wanted to say before I answer anything, I am in no way an expert. When I made the documentary with the Catalyst team at the ABC, I was on a learning journey, for want of a better term. I had no idea. I was about to turn 50. I didn't know what I was in for. And the process was me learning about what was coming up for me. And I'm now nearly 52, and my goodness, am I in it? I am right smack bang in the centre of it now. I had no idea what I was in for, absolutely no idea. And as you said, Jo, every person's experience is very, very different with this, which makes it quite difficult to navigate, I think, unless you have access to good doctors and good medical professionals and people who actually know what they're talking about. So it can be a bit baffling and confusing. And even though I had all of that when I was making the documentary, I was still a bit baffled and confused by a lot of the things that I experienced. And I realized in hindsight, perimenopause started for me around 45, I think. I was working on ABC Radio. I remember it vividly because I'd started doing my own show. It was a national daily show, and radio is something I've done for 20 years. And then all of a sudden, I got so anxious every day about trying to go on air, speaking, my voice, everything, whether or not I was doing it right, good enough, all of these things that were just, the anxiety was overwhelming. I've not experienced anything like it. There were some days where I thought I just couldn't even go on air, and that was something I hadn't been familiar with at all. And I was also coming out in hives all over my body. This is a medical thing more so than mental health, but neither the doctor suggested it could be perimenopause in terms of the heightened anxiety, and the naturopath and that was a woman. I feel like it wasn't at the front of anyone's mind even 5 years ago for a lot of women. So we were getting lots of information, and I wasn't really, I don't think I was getting to the core of the problem, which was I was hugely anxious because my hormones were completely out of whack, and I thought I was losing my mind. It was a bit frightening, and it put into question everything I thought I could do. And I tried to navigate it as best I could. And I now realise what it was. And I think that's why I love doing things like this, especially for an organisation like Beyond Blue, which is awesome because knowledge is power. And we need to know what our options are and to recognise when these things are happening, what it is and how it affects us, both our physical and our mental health.
Thank you for sharing. I'm sure there's people all around Australia nodding their heads like we were with half the things that you were saying. Jayshree, I'll come to you now to help ensure that we're basically starting on the same page. So could you explain to us what the technical definitions of perimenopause and menopause are?
Yes, thank you. And thanks for having me on this particular webinar. I'm really excited because this is home ground. This is mental health. So I'm just so excited to have Beyond Blue looking at this very important topic. Perimenopause, as it sounds, peri means around. So perimenopause is the transition into menopause. Menopause is actually only one day when the period stops. That's it. So we kind of interpose all kinds of terminology. When we talk about menopause, we're talking really about the transition into menopause and then the bit afterwards as well. People out there might be a little bit depressed when I tell them that the average transition story is between 10 and 12 years, but with fluctuations. So it's not like just, one horrible downhill sort of trudge. It's not like that, but there are changes that go on for about 10 or 12 years, beginning with the perimenopause, which is starting in the brain first at about 43 to 45, somewhere in the mid-40s. So this is not, the picture of the elderly woman with menopause. This is, this is myth. And this is many others who are in their mid-40s at the peak of their careers, at the peak of their everything they want to be doing in life. Suddenly, a percentage will experience perimenopause or mental ill health because it starts in the brain. That's what I want to stress. Everybody talks about the hot flushes and the cessation of periods and maybe not being fertile, but it's the brain stuff that really starts early, continues on, and I think is the biggest thing that upsets the quality of life for some women, not all women. I don't want to medicalise menopause because there are those lucky women who go through menopause and don't experience anything particularly difficult. But then there are squillions who do. So that's who we're trying to assist and improve the understanding about.
I mean, you mentioned hot flushes, and I suppose the physical symptoms, some of them are really well known, but the mental health symptoms can often catch women by surprise. So we're even hearing this in the chat already from many who are sharing their experiences. So could you speak to us about these symptoms?
Yeah, and your problem, Joan, is going to get me to shut up because I really get very passionate about this. So the mental health symptoms that often the women who are susceptible, vulnerable, and we don't really understand who is, because there's a percentage of the population who really struggle with this. I can hypothesize that it's the women who've had mental health problems before. It's the women who've had awful things happen in their early life. So they've had early life and subsequent traumas. So let's put a pin in that, because when these women get to menopause age, and we're perimenopause, we're talking 43, 44, 45, around there, the mental health stuff that they experience first is often a rage, so anger, really out of proportion to what the incident is, rage, hostility towards people they love and other people, irritability over snapping and swearing over stuff that normally wouldn't bother them. Anxiety is really critical. So Miff mentioned this, and I see this a lot, is that people say, I just can't do what I've done for decades. Suddenly becomes this big mountain to climb. And that anxiety then breeds its own fear. Once somebody has a panic attack, they live in fear of the next panic attack. And so the fear of the fear. So anxiety is really big as well. I mean, we talk about menopausal depression, but I really think it's menopausal mental ill health, because it's more than depression. And I've just mentioned anxiety, rage, irritability. There can be tears and a sense of sadness, but it's not the same as the major depressive condition that we're familiar with in younger women and in men. This is different. It's a different beast, and that's the issue. There's also very poor self-esteem. So women who've, been sort of quite reasonably positive in themselves suddenly start to doubt themselves, like Miff described, and also feel like they're giving themselves negative self-talk. You're old, you're ugly, you're fat, all that negative self-talk that just accelerates and makes the self-esteem disappear through the boots. There is this other thing which is called dissociation. This is a weird symptom to actually experience and describe, but it's when anxiety really gets to be quite bad that the person kind of shifts out of their body. So we get this expression that people say, I'm sort of not really all there. I'm looking at myself doing stuff, or I look in the mirror and I go, who is that looking back at me? That's dissociation, that people have got such bad anxiety that kind of step out of themselves. You might have experienced that everybody might have had that experience of when you drive through a traffic light and you think, oh, was that red or was that green? That's dissociation. Hopefully you've driven through a green traffic light, but it is that phenomenon of just not being quite there in the present. And this happens a lot. But the other thing is, I think it's important to understand the mental health stuff, particularly the anxiety, the sadness, the tearfulness, is also with a cognitive component, or the higher executive thinking and learning and memory really can be affected. This is the so-called brain fog. So many women say things like, I can't remember the mobile phone number, which is 10 digits. I've got to write it down. Or I'll go to the supermarket and I'm standing there thinking, I can't remember what it is that I want to buy. And so many times, this is really a big issue for many, many, many women, because they've functioned multitasking, handling those ratty adolescent kids and, the boss who's a pain, etc., quite easily by multitasking. And all of a sudden, they're not able to multitask. It's like the brain is shutting down. And the other common thing is people go, oh, I have dementia in the family. Is this what's happening to me? Because it can happen really suddenly. It's like, super brain one week, and then how do I turn on the computer the next? It can be very fluctuating, and it really disturbs people when it happens like that. So mental health is big, but at the same time, there are lots of weird physical health things that go on. Miff alluded to it with the hives, which is that itchy allergic reaction rash. So many women suddenly develop allergies to things that they never had a problem with. Like women who say, I love bread. And now all of a sudden, if I eat bread, I break out into, a rash. or I've used this particular shampoo forever and all of a sudden I've got a terrible allergic reaction. So menopause affects all sorts of systems. It affects the immune system, affects bones, affects body in terms of hot flushes, temperature control, but definitely affects the brain through the actual chemical interaction between the declining estrogen levels. And it doesn't just go here today, gone tomorrow. It's not like that. It's a sawtooth pattern with decreasing levels over 10 to 12 years. And that's why sometimes people flip up and they go, oh, I feel great. In fact, I feel better than great. And everyone goes, oh, is this bipolar disorder? No, it's not. But that is a thing. You know, sometimes women actually say, I feel better than best. And then they crash and then it goes up, the mood goes up again. And then there's another, you know, so there's quite a fluctuation. So it is complex is my point, but people should not write this off as this is a psychiatric disorder. All right. We have to understand more about it, but we need to understand the role that the menopausal hormones play and the fluctuations in those hormones in this 10 to 12 year transitional process, but also that it's not everyone who goes through this.
Jayashree, absolutely fascinating. I mean, to me, when I hear you talk about those complexities, it actually just sounds like we just head into this huge kind of midlife collision. So, Sarah, maybe you could speak to us a little bit more about that idea.
Yeah, midlife collision is exactly the term we use, Jo, because what happens is menopause often occurs at a time in life when we're juggling the teenage kids or the kids entering BCE or something like that. We've got those older parents or older spouses or older siblings that we're providing care for, you know, the old concept of the sandwich generation. And then you lay on top of that, maybe it's those injuries from playing netball on concrete courts for 20 years. You're at the peak of your career, all the pressures are on, you're just juggling so many things. And then you layer some of that insomnia from the menopause transition on top, or a bit of anxiety from the menopause transition on top, and suddenly it's all just a bit too much. And what we see often is women foregoing careers or foregoing career opportunities because it's about the only thing they can drop out of all of this stuff that's going on in midlife. And sometimes that's a big challenge when we're talking about menopause and how we manage menopause and stay well. Sometimes it's really hard to understand what's actually due to those fluctuating hormones and those challenges that Jayashree's just beautifully outlined, and what's due to all those other things like the caring load and the cognitive load. So managing menopause can be a bit about recognising all these other things that go on in our lives at the same time.
I just want to remind everyone we are going to get to questions. I guess on a slightly different note, one of the challenges, and we've kind of touched on it already, is talking about menopause in a very general way. And the reason why that's not really fair is because everyone's experience is obviously very unique. So, for example, I think I did get off pretty easy. I mean, apart from hot flushes and having my makeup put on and having it end up in my chest 5 minutes later at work and some restless night's sleep. But I know other women who have had really distressing and debilitating transitions. So, Sarah, what's important that we keep in mind when we're having discussions around menopause and perimenopause, given that everyone can have a really different experience?
Well, I think it's being able to really wrap our arms around those people who do have that really terrible experience. So rule of thumb, we say about 1 in 4 people have a really awful experience. Around 1 in 4 will sail through, and the remaining 1 in 2 falls somewhere on that spectrum in the middle. And it's actually, there's this great long-term, and I'm going to test you later on whether you can say this 3 times fast, biopsychosociocultural. Okay, so Jayashree's outlined the psychological. There's a biological component. We know African Americans, for example, have a different experience than Hispanic women living in the States, and a different experience to Asian American women. There's studies showing that. But then we have a social sort of sphere to that as well. So we know that the menopause experience can be affected by your financial stability, your ability to get and use health information, whether you have a partner or not. You know, it could be good or could be bad. And then there's the cultural expectations. And in Australia, we actually have quite a problem with gendered ageism. So if you're a woman in the workplace in Australia, you can actually be really, you can have your menopause experience quite flavoured by the fact that you're worried about this gendered ageism and people treating you as if you are this sort of old woman who's going to fly off the handle. Like, we have some terrible stereotypes, terrible. So that whole biopsychosociocultural thing means that even two sisters who grew up in the same household and share some of those genes, their experience is going to be really different. So we have to really respect that.
Yeah.
We don't want to assume that everyone's going to have a terrible experience, because that's not helpful either. And we just have to believe women when they say, this is my experience, and wrap our arms around those who need that support.
Yeah, without judgment. Miff, as someone who's made a TV show about menopause, I'm kind of interested in your reflections in the spotlight that's currently on menopause. So what sort of things are you hearing in conversations that you're having with friends, families, and members of the public?
I love that there's a spotlight on it now. I love that it's just gone up so much, even since I made that documentary 2 years ago, that women around me know what's going on with their own bodies and their own minds, and realising and seeking help, because it's so essential. And you see lots of people playing in the space now. There are a lot of influencers, even, I guess you could call them menopause influencers, who are delving into that space. And I think it's great to get the word out there, and it's great to get the knowledge out there and the understanding out there. But I think it's also important to remember that with things like this, there's lots of people who are probably trying to make money as well. There's always people like that who get on board something that is obviously growing in terms of the consciousness of the wider community. So just be aware of where you get your information from, and always go to professionals, I guess, if you want real answers. And yes, talk to your girlfriends, talk to your partners, all of those things, because I think the more we talk about it, the less stigmatized it becomes. And that was one thing with the documentary. When I was asked to do it, my first answer was no, because I've never really thought about my body as a thing that I wanted to talk about publicly, and my mental health or anything like that. It was not my thing. But I realised that I had a bit of my own stigma and shame around menopause and ageing and all of those things that has been brought up. And I needed to do it because I needed to push myself to change those understandings of what menopause was, who gets it. I was in it. It was really important to get over that stigma and shame. And I think that's been the great thing about more and more people talking about it, is that less and less we feel the stigma and the shame. We're just like, nah, you got to know about this. I can't believe we weren't taught about this from previous generations. I don't know how they got through it, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, I, for one, am very glad that you chose to speak about it. I'm sure I'm not alone in that thought. One of the things that we're really big on at Beyond Blue is that you actually don't need to soldier on and struggle by yourself. That if you're not feeling yourself, that it's never too early to go and talk to someone about it, which is exactly what you've just spoken to. So, Jayshree, what are the flags that someone should look out for and then actually seek support for?
So there are quite a lot of flags, in the sense of the woman herself is really intuitive about what is going on in her body. So many, many, many times, I mean, obviously I'm sitting in a tertiary hospital super clinic. So by the time I see people, they're really, really, really severely affected by it. But what's sad is that back when it started, that she wasn't listened to. And I think that is one of the big issues that I'm so excited about all the work you guys are doing, because that's where you're working, is raising the consciousness and awareness about it, so that the woman who next comes into her general practitioner or other doctor's office and says, it's my hormones, doc, should be listened to, because she knows what she's talking about. So yes, women have busy lives. Of course, we all have very, very busy lives, but a 45-year-old has been juggling the same busyness for quite a while, and she's got good at it. Or she's done things that, have changed her life. It's when I see and hear the stories of, I just can't do this. One day I woke up and I just can't do this. And then you look for all the other wraparound symptoms, particularly the brain fog and the sleeplessness and the anxiety and the hostility that are out of character for her. And that is a real red flag that something else is going on here. And it's that tipping factor that really is the hormone biological impact in the brain that we need to understand as medical practitioners. And that's what is currently, I think, lagging behind where the social world and the media world is really making leaps and bounds with. We're coming behind you, but it is important that there is more awareness in, say, primary care practice, and particularly in my profession in psychiatry, about the role, the biological heavy hitting that can go on in some women when these hormones that are particularly impactful in the brain start to fluctuate and change brain chemistry, change brain circuitry, so that you get the mental ill health symptoms and brain fog. And that's what I worry about, that we haven't quite got there yet, because that's reversible and treatable in a different way to the other sorts of issues that people present with. No amount of psychotherapy is going to reverse the brain hormone issue if that's the big tipping factor issue. All right, I'll say it again, because I find that too many women are given the advice that you're doing too much, slow down, take it easy, or here's your antidepressant, it'll fix everything. You obviously have difficulties adjusting to aging. Some of those things might be right, but let's not miss the woman who's got a significant new depression that she is telling you is new, it's arrived new, the symptoms are new for her, or they're exacerbations of things that she's had in the past. That's the person who needs new treatment. And that's what we're trying to get across, that the new treatment will end up probably being a combination of hormone strategies plus antidepressant strategies. Plus, of course, there's going to be psychotherapies and talking therapies, because that's good for everyone, really, to actually have some importance there. So that's, I think, where we're struggling. Psychiatry, general practice, gynecology, endocrinology, not looking at the brain, but they're looking at hormones. We, unfortunately, specialists practice in little bits. And this is a whole woman issue.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to get better at that.
I'm seriously glad that you brought that up. I'm going to go to Sarah, because we actually hear constantly from our community that it's actually quite difficult to find health professionals with the right expertise, and that sometimes when they go and see the experts, they don't always feel heard when they're discussing their symptoms. So, Sarah, what would your advice be to women who are in that situation?
So I think there's a couple of things you can do, is get really prepared for the consultation for a start. So Jean Hales has a menopause symptom checklist. You can download that, tick it off, use that as the focal point for the conversation. If you're not being heard, the best thing is to actually go and find another doctor. It's that, unfortunately, that simple. Really difficult for women in rural and regional areas, but there are now some really good telehealth options that are specifically focused on menopause, and they're staffed by GPs who have a real interest in menopause. So I think it's about being really prepared for your consultation, focusing just on that one thing, and kind of advocating for yourself in the sense of not just a random, this is a bit of a problem. Say, no, this is affecting me in this way, and this is what it is stopping me from doing. And unfortunately, you do have to be a bit of an advocate for yourself.
Yeah. Look, a reminder again, we will get to your question shortly, but first of all, I do want to talk about some treatment options, because I think it's a thing that I hear women talking about and often learning from each other about, in terms of what treatments are suitable for people in which circumstances. So, Jayshree, maybe you can give us an overview if someone is struggling with the transition and they're experiencing the mood fluctuations and strong symptoms of depression or anxiety that you've spoken about already today. So what are their treatment options?
Yeah. So as it stands, unfortunately, the anti-common sense approach is the strong one. So at the moment, most guidelines are still saying antidepressants for depression or mood disturbance, even in the midlife, right? So there is not a separate category that says this is menopause depression, because as one of my patients said, isn't this common sense? If it's a depression, it's caused by hormonal fluctuations, why wouldn't you use a hormonal treatment? And she's right. But the problem is that At the moment, as it stands, the guidelines have said we haven't got the big trials, the big clinical trials that show that hormones are, as good as or better than antidepressant treatment, because it hasn't been funded. Again, this awful sort of let's not worry about this. It's just one of those women things. We'll just, they'll just get through it. Is nonsense. And that's why we haven't got the big clinical trials that are actually funded to answer that question. But as it stands, antidepressants are often first line. Now, this is a problem because, again, let's talk about the two main groups of women who present with mental ill health in the 45 to 48 and 50-year age group with their first symptoms of menopause. Two groups. One group who've never had anything before, and I do see this group as well. So there's nothing, they've got great lives, everything's working for them, and then bang, at about 45, she suddenly develops this mental ill health condition. For her, it would have been sensational had we been able to actually hear her intuitive approach, which is, I'm normally pretty good, this isn't me, something X has happened overnight. It's kind of a bang process. So, that's telling us that there is a biological switch. Something has happened. That would be the perfect person to start on hormone therapy without having to go through all the other hoops. The other group is the woman who has had depression in the past and has been treated quite successfully with an antidepressant, with psychotherapy, with all sorts of lifestyle advice, and she's done well. And all of a sudden, she deteriorates at about 45 in her mental health. And so we've got now a relapse situation. So in both cases, unfortunately, these particular individuals will receive standard antidepressants, and they are not as effective in both groups. They'll have some effect, but I sometimes liken it to, it's like if you want to get from A to B, why would you go in a slow car down all the back roads when you could get on a plane and fly quickly from A to B? So hormone therapy is a useful thing. It does help to actually treat mental health symptoms. We have to get out of this idea of thinking that hormone therapy is for hot flushes and only for problems below the waist, that doesn't have any effect in the brain. These are potent brain steroids. Estrogen, progesterone, testosterone are potent brain steroids. They work in the brain in many different parts of the brain, and they then arrange or control the brain chemistry, which determines your mood, your anxiety, and as well your thinking. And then the chemicals also work on the brain circuits, the hard wiring of your computer in your head. And that is also where the brain fog comes in, that you can't quite remember this or learn this new bit of information or whatever. So for some women, and again, I go back to it, I'm not medicalizing. We're not talking about, every single person who goes through menopause. We're talking about the women who are struggling, presenting with, my mental health is not what it should be. It's not what it was. It's not good enough for me to continue being in a relationship, continue my work, and continue being happy. Do something. So for the do something, I would love for the medicos out there to feel empowered to lay down the options in front of the woman to say, let's collaborate on the approach. We could go down a hormone approach. We could go down an antidepressant approach. We could go down psychotherapy. We could do all of the above. But I'm going to work with you to work out what is the right approach for you. And we might not get it right first off. We'll have to suck it and see somewhat. But I'm also going to manage your physical health during this, because you're midlife. Bad news, you're going to have to wait, you're going to have to do breast screens, you're going to have to do pap smears, you're going to have to check your bloods for what is going on with your cholesterol, your blood pressure, all those lovely things. But we'll do all of that together and then have options for the mental health. It is not just the automatic, if you're depressed, here's your antidepressant. It should not be like that. And especially in this age group, I would really hope that down the track, do another program, Miff, please, and we can talk about, what happened with the hormone therapy treatment approach, because I see too many women who are given too many antidepressants plus antipsychotics plus mood stabilizers plus ECT. They've already got brain fog. You're giving ECT and you're making it worse, or you're giving a number of drugs with a number of side effects, and you're not actually targeting what the issue is. It's not going to be easy. This is as you said early on, Joanna, this is an individual-based prescribing. We've got to get to that personalised medicine idea, but we want options for our women out there.
Look,
Joanna,
I think, yes, Sarah.
Can I add just one thing too? I think it's just to add on to what Chersh is saying. If someone's out there, whether they've got a mental health concern or not, if you are struggling with hot sweats, if you are struggling with insomnia, hot flushes and night sweats and insomnia and vaginal dryness, whatever you're struggling with, please don't hesitate and go to see your doctor about getting some help for that. And please don't hesitate to take menopause hormone therapy if you and your doctor decide that it's right for you. I think there's a bit of a fear around hormone therapy sometimes, and yes, there are a small number of women who where the risks might outweigh the benefits, but by and large, we shouldn't have anyone struggling through symptoms around menopause.
Yeah. I mean, I think we could do a whole separate webinar on other strategies and supports that people could try. I mean, I personally know I think I tried every possible remedy and vitamin that was on the market, but I found getting the basics right really helps. So things like exercising, and I was getting really slack on that front, eating well, drinking less, stretching, weight training, hot and cold treatments like saunas, cold plunges, cryotherapy and the like. But I reckon the biggest thing was actually talking to three mates, my best girlfriends. We'd get together once a month and just openly, honestly talk about everything that we were going through. And laughing about the frustrating moments really helped all of us. So, I mean, that's at a very, very simple level. But I think because I'm watching the clock, this is just, we're absolutely belting through this. I do want to get to some questions. So I think if we can, we might think about these questions, my beautiful panel, as kind of rapid fire Q&As as much as you can. We're still getting out all your fabulous information. But we've got one for Miff. It says, thank you, Miff. I wondered where this debilitating anxiety was coming from. I'm finding I overstress things that were never a problem previously. So how did you actually overcome that?
Oh, goodness me. Well, I didn't know that it was perimenopause, so I don't think I had any of the tools to deal with it. I had to actually make use of the mental health plan that the Victorian government had on offer. I'm very keen to destigmatise that too. If you need it, do it. Get the plans if they're in existence in your state around the country, because it's just so important to talk issues through with people who can point you in the right direction. And so I did things like that. And I think for anxiety, it's tell people around you too that it's going on. People actually want to help. People aren't. I think the world is changing enough that people don't put you in a box necessarily if you're experiencing these things as somehow difficult or a problem. I think most people are experiencing levels of anxiety, whether it be from perimenopause or menopause or from, just the way the world is at the moment. There's anxiety everywhere. So people understand. So be honest, be communicative about what you're going through, get some mental health help if you can. That's what I did. That's all I could do at that time.
To be honest, Miff, if the people around you aren't supporting you, they're not the right people to have in your life.
Exactly.
Anyone who wants to answer this is welcome to. This is a question from a man who's joined us on the webinar. He said, I genuinely want to support my wife through these changes and be there for her in every way I can. However, I sometimes find it challenging to navigate my own emotions in the process. How can we work together to ensure that we both feel heard, valued and supported? And before I go to you, I'll just add, with my husband, Ali Daddo's book, Queen Menopause, I got him on an audio book and I made him listen to it because it's got a whole lot of different experiences of people in a chapter there, as well as her own experience and lots of information. But it was just a way of getting him, he could sit on a tractor and listen to it and then come in and be like, oh, wow, I had no idea. So anyhow, that's my little two bits. Over to anyone who else would like to add to that.
I might jump in there. We're trying to work on a strategy called Him for Her, And it is really critical. And I mean, again, it affects, if she's having struggles with her mental health, it affects the whole of her community. Literally, her whole community can go down if she's down. So, you know, we forget how important sometimes we forget how important midlife women are for a whole range of people, as well as her. So I think education, which is back in the hands of you lovely media giants, because that's really important. That's been missing for a long time. But also, you know, it's sometimes we get into again, we do couple work as clinicians. We do see the couple, and we get into the plumbing details as well. You know, there's sexual difficulties. Sex life is different. You might, you know, sort of have to take a different approach to actually having a lot more foreplay, all sorts of nitty-gritty details we can go into. But, you know, it's important to understand what is going on, because often the irritability and hostility will be focused on those who are nearest and dearest to her, as much as she doesn't want to. So it's trying to then defend against what is going on and understanding what's really behind all of this. So there's more than just one woman involved in this process.
Yeah. There is so many things coming through on the chat again about GPs and doctors not listening. I mean, how do you convince your doctor that you can actually be perimenopausal at 38 years old, which this person was later detected to be suffering? She said it was so frustrating until she eventually found a doctor who believed it was. It helped explain all the physical and mental symptoms, but it took a while to get the diagnosis. Now, Sarah, you've already touched on this, but it's just this common thing. How do you give people the will to not give up hope? You know, like especially if there's not a lot of options available for them.
Yeah, it's really hard, Joanna, because look, we're doing a lot of work trying to educate GPs and really get them to understand that perimenopause can start quite early for some people. And I don't have a silver bullet magic golden potion thing here. It is really just about being able to advocate for yourself, perhaps take that symptom checklist and say, look, if it's not perimenopause, how come I've ticked off 8 of these 15 things, right? And maybe you could document in your patient notes why you're dismissing my concern about this. And I tell you, if you get a doctor to note why they're dismissing something, it really sharpens their attention. Yeah. Don't tell anyone I said that.
Can I just add, don't get a blood test of a hormone, right? That's what often happens. The GP or other doctor will do a blood test and go, look, here's your hormones. They're all fine. Of course they're fine. You don't have a tumor, you know, so it's not about that. And unfortunately, that's quite an invalidating evidence that comes back. So don't get a blood test for your hormones. Get a blood test for your cholesterol and all those other things, but don't get a blood test for your hormones. It is a clinical diagnosis, and you are in the best position to advocate, as Sarah has said, for yourself. Shout it out from the rooftop. Get all the bits of reading material you can and share it with your doctor.
Jayashree, I'm glad that you said that, because that has been another really common theme coming through on the chat. And Sarah, I love the idea of a menopause checklist, because we do that in mental health. That's often the first step to somebody getting their GP to understand that there are issues when they actually do the check. Mick or Sarah, can you talk about menopause as a rite of passage, a gateway to magnificence, as a call to wake up and have firmer boundaries to be comfortable with your truest self? Mick, I feel like that's you.
I love this. I just love this, because like we talk about things like the rage and the irritability. I mean, I'm known as a pretty bubbly kind of person, happy most of the time. And something has shifted, but there's a joy in that for me, because all of a sudden, I read something the other day. It's not actually hostility or rage. It's actually clarity. And you're seeing things in a sense, in a way that you've never seen them before. And there's a real joy in that, which means you're learning again. There's a lot about the hormones that we had previously that allowed us to be much calmer and more kind of, you know, okay with things, because we were that's how we're designed. But now that we're not so, it's like, oh, actually, what do I really want for myself? What do I think about this? How do I express that without seeming like I'm unhinged or something? it's a whole new learning experience, and it's actually quite good, and I'm quite enjoying being a bit of a mole sometimes.
Bit of a mole. I love that.
Out there, and we sometimes call it, I don't give a fire truck syndrome once you get past menopause, because it's like the small things don't seem to worry you as much. You're just like, nah, I'm just going to deal with it.
Jayashri, all your talk before about hormone replacement therapy, somebody has come online and they've said, what if they can't actually have HRTs? What are the options, at that level?
Yeah, sure. And it's particularly related to women who have breast cancer. They are often the women who cannot have HRT, or women who've had blood clots in the lung, especially, or in the DVT. That's a red flag. So what is it now being developed, and we're working with a couple of them in the mental health area, is a group of estrogens called brain estrogens, selective estrogen receptor modulators. They work in the brain and they work on bone, but they do not affect breast, uterus, or ovary tissue. So they're selective estrogens, and that's a really interesting class of medications that we are working with in clinical trials, but there are some that are available for women with osteoporosis, for example. Mm-hmm. So there are newer things coming out like that. But again, I'm not anti the antidepressants, all right? So antidepressants have their role, they have their place. My only plea is don't go into knee-jerk mode with an antidepressant before you really know what's going on. So antidepressants are there, they are available. There are also other brain stimulation treatments like transcranial magnetic stimulation, which doesn't have the brain fog exacerbating effect of ECT, for example. And I'm talking about women who have significant depression, right, or significant mental ill health. I'm not talking about the other group who are going through a process with transitions and with bumps, but they're riding through the bumps in their own way and they're getting through it. That's not who I'm talking about. I'm talking about, the moribund, cannot function, my life is just awful group.
Yeah. We've got another question, and this I'm happy to open up to anyone. Struggling with sleep, can't stay asleep, wake up multiple times throughout the night, which I think is impacting mental health and energy levels. 100% would be. Yep. This particular person's been using HRT patches for over a year now, but her sleep hasn't improved. Yep. Is there anything else that anyone can recommend that they could try to help with sleep?
Yep. So it's usually the progesterone that's the problem here, because you break up HRT. Old terminology is HRT. Cool terminology now is menopause hormone treatment or menopause hormone therapy. So MHT has got two bits. One is the estrogen bit and the other is the progesterone bit. So it's the progesterone that helps with sleep and helps with anxiety. It's the estrogen that helps with the brain fog or the concentration and the mood. So that's what they've got, different roles for the different hormones. So sometimes what happens is if the progesterone bit is not in line with the estrogen bit, if the dosing's not quite right, the ratio's not quite right, that can have a problem. And so I'd say have a look at the progesterone type and dose and get that right. And this is often people sometimes who've had a hysterectomy for other reasons, they've had their uterus out, they won't get prescribed the progesterone because that's the old teaching that you only needed the progesterone for uterus health. You don't, you need it for your brain. See, this is again, don't forget the brain. Yeah. So again, it's important to balance those two hormones. That's one thing. Secondly, of course, unfortunately women ruminate. We're really good at ruminating. So if you get disrupted sleep, like you might get a few hours and then you wake up, suddenly you're making lists, you're thinking about all the different things. You have to work out how not to ruminate. And that will involve a number of different strategies. Some people use apps on their phone to help them get back to sleep. Some people use a bit of music, but don't get up and start working on things because that'll just make you alive and awake, and that's not what you want at that point. There are some sleep new medications that are available that work directly on the sleep orexin hormone system, a different hormone system that is governed by estrogen as well, but it's a different class of medications as well. But again, all the sleep hygiene stuff is important. Are you too hot? Are you too cold? Is it too noisy? Is there too much light? Are you not doing a brain dump of all the things that worried you during the day before you get into bed? Are you watching TV? Is there too much blue
stimulation
light? Yeah. Are you playing a game on your phone? Don't do that, because that's going to keep you awake.
Send people to the Sleep Health Foundation. They've got lots of resources around helping to fall asleep, and we've done work with them around menopause.
Fantastic. Anything you want to add there, Miff?
Oh, look, sleep's not something I'm particularly good at this point in my life, and I've done all the wrong things the whole time. So listen again to the experts. I've got
I put on, this is so random, but I put on audiobooks with really beautiful narrators with an Irish accent.
I do,
and
that
I just
too.
literally, I'm asleep within seconds. So I absolutely love it. That's my go-to. We have a question for you, Sarah, on workplace. This is from Sherry. She says, as a woman who fought hard for gender equality in the workplace, she felt a sense of reluctance to speak out about the impacts of menopause that was having on her career, i.e. her ability to absorb information and focus on critical thinking, etc. Do you have any suggestions as to how she could have balance that scenario better? A decline in her ability to meaningfully contribute versus gender equality, as well as role expectations.
Oh, well, that's a nice, easy question for me. Look, I think all of the conversations we're having as a society now are going to help her have those conversations in the workplace. And we know from the National Women's Health Survey we did that a lot of women don't want to talk about menopause in the workplace because they think they're going to be discriminated against. This is a perfect time to go and gather up your girlfriends in the tea room and have the conversation, start having the conversation in the workplace. Again, there's no really easy solution for this one, Joanna, so thanks.
I like to throw you the really tricky ones.
It's the stigma, having the conversation, and, maybe shoot across some of the information that's available. Monash University's got a ton, Australasian Menopause Society's got some, we've got some on workplace and how to have a conversation.
Okay, beautiful. We've had another question about the brain fog. As soon as you said that, Jayashree, the whole chat line just sort of literally everyone was just going, yeah, very familiar with that. How people cope with brain fog, and anyone can jump in with this. Like, what do you do in that situation?
So obviously, I'm going to say if it's a really, really severe problem and it's coupled with other mental health issues, then hormone therapy would be a good thing to think about, as long as you don't have medical reasons why you can't. So that would be the first thing. Second thing is, I do have a colleague, and I think she was on your Catalyst program, Associate Professor Caroline Gervich, who's actually developed CogTrain. So there are techniques, the little cheat tricks that you can use. One of the things that I think is really important is that you can use notes, and again, there are no can't do it. You've got to always just be on form. There is nothing wrong with saying, oh, hang on a second, I'll just write that down. Or, having little tricks like trying to remember names you associate with something else. So that they're little tricks, like, oh, there's that giant person whose name happens to be tall.
Joanna.
Yeah, so little tricks to help you. But at the end of the day, it's also thinking there's nothing catastrophic with saying, oh, hang on, I can't quite remember that. What was it? And somebody else can help you or jump in with the answer. All right. So, but there are cognitive tricks, there are CogTrain tricks, but also it is important to understand the root cause of this, that it's organic, often organic, and so biological. So we do need to help that. But then also it's interesting, the brain over time has different ways of reshaping itself too. So this is one of the things that happens over time. Women get better at what we call top of the mountain strategic thinking. Different areas of your brain come on stream, which means you're a much better person to actually think about how you're going to pull this business out of the doldrums that it's in at the moment, because you've got strategies. What you won't do is you won't have the minutiae at your fingertips, but then get a minion who can do that for you.
Sarah, did you want to add to that?
We all need more minions, honestly.
I joke that I need a wife, but what I think, pen and paper, and you've got the phone in your hand, take notes, lean into your journals at night as well, can help with your sleep. It's okay to say, oh, brain fog moment, We have brain fog moments when we're pregnant. We have men have brain fog moments. It's okay to lean into it and own it.
Yeah, I'll agree, Sarah. You just have to be kinder to yourself too.
Yeah.
You know, like the high expectations that we set for ourselves, they're too high sometimes, and we need to drop some of them during this time, because otherwise you'll internally combust, you know, and yeah, be honest about it. People don't mind. They genuinely, if they like you, they don't mind that you can't remember that word in that moment.
I want to second that. I hate the absolute obsession we have with perfectionism in society, because I'm yet to meet a perfect person. Miff, I just got to say on the chat, there is just a general positive shout out constantly coming through. There's a lot of love. They're just like, Miff, you are so delightful. And you kind of touched on this about being kinder to yourself. Somebody said, any tips for coping day to day when you're not acting like yourself, but then you get to the end of the day and you just feel enormously guilty?
Oh, well, again, it's being kind, but guilt, I think, is also tied up with that idea of perfectionism. And as women, we're brought up to set these standards for ourselves that are so incredibly high. And the thing that I found that worked for me the best is to start to minimize your life a lot. Like and this is where the clarity comes in, and this is where the joy of it comes in, is you work out what you need in that day and get rid of the noise that is not so necessary. Focus on what you need. And then I think all that extra noise starts to fall down, and it just reduces a little bit. And I think that's been the biggest help for me, is the clarity has brought me an ability to minimize, say no when you have to say no, and don't be frightened of it. All these things that we've been brought up to be, relearn that for a bit. Even if you can go back to that, that's fine. But for now, it's like, to get through, you've got to cut out the noise. And that, I find that really works for me. Make your life simpler and be kinder to yourself.
Brilliant. We've got one last question. I'm actually going to roll two into one. So, Sarah, I'm coming to you, so you know it's going to be tricky. One, people asking about, does it get better over time? Is it going to last 10 years? Is there a definitive figure as to the duration that people might be experiencing it? And then also, this was a question specifically for you, Sarah, from Wendy, saying, can you recommend any alternative treatments, so natural supplements or types of exercise that help?
So easy one first, look, exercise is really important, weight bearing exercise, some resistance training, strength to keep those bones and the heart nice and healthy. In terms of natural supplements, I tell everyone to go and watch Miff's show, because she actually does go through some of those natural supplements, and I can't rattle them all off the top of my head. I'd say go and watch Miff's show for some of those natural supplements. How long does it last? You know, again, this is that individual experience. 10 to 12 years is a pretty good figure, but I do know there are some women who are still experiencing hot flushes and night sweats well into their 70s, well after they've gone through the menopause transition, which is really horrible and hard. So there's no definitive answer on that one, I'm afraid.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we're heading into the wrapping up now. Yeah. This has been amazing. And I should say, as we head towards the wrap up, it's been a really sensational discussion. A massive thank you to everyone who has contributed. To close it out, I'd just like to quickly ask our panelists, in summation, what's the one thing out of a lot that we've covered today that you would share for people to take away?
I'll let Miff do her be kind one. I think it's concentrating on all of those things that are around your physical health as well, your diet. It's really important to stay well, because we're talking about menopause, but we've still got 30 odd years ahead of us, and we want to age well into that space post-menopause.
All right, Miff?
Oh, goodness. See this time as something that kicks off learning about yourself, I think is something that's so important, because I've never paid attention to my body. I wasn't big at sport. My mum played hockey for Australia and I went the opposite direction. I had no skills whatsoever. And so I've had to learn about what I need to do physically to get through moments like this that'll set me up for the next 30 years. Like you said, it's actually be curious about what your body needs, what your mental health needs, and use it as a learning experience, I think, and, you know, enjoy the rage and the irritability, because it means you can just cut to the chase, and it's kind of fun for the first time in your life, where you're not worrying so much about all the other people around you. I know your partner might say, you know, that it's not the best for them, but, you know, they've had the nice you for a long time. Enjoy this.
Jayashri, what about you?
So I would say don't forget the brain in the menopause process, because you may have to advocate for your own brain health, which is expressed as mental ill health in some women. And I want to stress that, because the majority of women do get through it all with little bumps and little tweaks and whatever else. But there is a group who don't, and we don't want to leave any woman behind. So there are hopefully going to be new options available that you can then discuss with your primary healthcare and other practitioners, so that we don't forget that there's a brain that's impacted by a menopausal process.
This is so good. I guess for me, it would be continue to get informed, help other women in your life get informed, because you'll be doing them a favour as well. And as it has been discussed a couple of times today, never be afraid to advocate for your health. Now, I know that was actually 3 wrapped up as 1 for me. Sorry, not sorry. I do want to mention that we put a link in for this documentary into the chat. So you've heard it here. Go and watch it. It's absolutely sensational. But sadly, we've run out of time. To our beautiful panel, my goodness, thank you for sharing your sensational advice today. I could have listened to you for 5 hours straight. And I'm also really appreciative of you, our audience, and everyone who's participated for your really helpful questions. I think, as we agree today, let's all make menopause something that we continue to talk about, not something that we suffer through in silence. And please remember, if you are being bothered by your symptoms, seek support early. As I said before, you don't need to soldier on alone. If there's one thing I think we've all learned today, it is that help is available. You might have to navigate it a bit, but it is available. We're going to leave you with a few links to get support if you do need it, or if you just want some more learnings. You can also check out that Beyond Blue webpage on mental health and menopause for more information. Of course, if you're needing further support for your mental health, contact the Beyond Blue support service on 1300 22 4636. And if you're in a position to contribute, our support service runs entirely off donations. So every dollar helps. And I don't think people actually realise it is run off donations. So we really do appreciate anything that comes in. So if you're able to assist, you can donate at the Beyond Blue website. And finally, you're going to receive a feedback survey in your email. It's going to take about all of 30 seconds to complete it. But that actually really helps us inform how we run our future webinars. So if you have and can spare the time, we would be so appreciative. And we'll also send you through a recording of the webinar very soon, so you can actually either rewatch it or you can share it with your networks. But a massive thank you for all of you for attending, and hopefully I will see you again next time. Bye.